Hi, I'm Paul Jermain, and welcome to another session of Smart Boating. As you know, if you watched the show before, we cover a wide variety of topics, from marine insurance to man overboard. And the idea is to provide you with some information to help you make smarter decisions and have more fun on the water. Today's show is right up that alley. It's on towing, and we're joined by the president of the Boston-area TowBoatUS, Tim Peters. Tim?
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you. Hey, before we get into this show, which is going to be a really good one, can you tell people a little bit about your boating background and a little bit about TowBoatUS?
Yep, sure. So I grew up boating in Cape Cod. Family had a sailboat down there. Did some sailing on a schooner in college. Got hooked up with TowBoatUS in 2002 and been working here more or less since then. So,
wow, okay.
Yep.
And TowBoatUS does all types of towing, but it's primarily known, I guess, primarily for recreational towing, I guess, right?
Yeah, we're a recreational boat towing and assistance company. So it's nationwide. There's a network of towers across the country, and we're, like a AAA on the water for boats.
That's a good analogy.
Yep, exactly.
All right. Well, you've got just the right experience, so why don't we get into the show?
All right, sounds good.
Okay. Well, Tim, this topic of towing is a large one, like a lot of ones we cover here on the show. Can't cover all the points, but we can cover, I think, some of the more important ones.
Sure.
And I thought what we'd do, if we could, is divide the show into basically three groups, three categories. One is how to avoid getting a tow.
Okay. Yep.
And then second, cover what to do if you do need a tow, you're out there in the water. And then finally, what to do when the tower actually arrives.
Sure.
Okay. So certainly, you to start with the beginning of this, you want to avoid the need for a tow in the first place, right?
Yep. And I would say, we're in New England, obviously. Half of the boats are on shore, half of the year.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of avoiding a potential tow is what you do in the winter. How you winterize your boat is going to dictate to how your season begins, and from there, it's just regular ongoing maintenance. But I think, can you imagine not driving your car for 6 months and then you jump
get
in?
laid up for a long time, yeah. And we're going to talk about that in a second. But I'd like to focus in now on the cost, because a lot of people may not be associated. If they're out there, they break down. There's some substantial costs from the time the boat leaves the dock and to the time the boat returns, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's an expensive business to be in. It's, we have licensed captains, we have, boats we have to maintain, insurance to, cover our bases. So, it gets up there.
That's hundreds of dollars an hour for a towboat to run out there, right?
Yeah.
And one of the important things is that they're not starting at the end of the harbor, straight out 5. They might be here we're on the Merrimack. They might take a half hour in no wake zone just to get out, but that clock is always ticking at $200 or $300 per hour, right?
Right. I just got that question 10 minutes ago. We had to go out and get a boat 20 miles offshore, and we have to go 20 miles to get the vessel, tow them in 15, and then another 15 to get back to our dock. So we have to account for all of that time.
There's a lot of distance there, and the clock's always going. So it's a good idea for most people to invest in towing insurance of some type, right? Because that limits their liability, maybe for a couple $100.
Exactly.
They can avoid ever getting a bill for a couple $1,000s.
Right. I mean, the insurance with BoatUS at least is $165 a year for unlimited towing. So you can't beat that. That's half the cost of 1/2 hour that you would pay to have a boat come out and help you. So it's definitely a good idea.
It's a smart idea, yeah. And of course, you want to avoid getting towed in the first place because of the inconvenience of your crew and possible safety issues. So get the insurance, but also try to avoid getting towed in the first place, right?
Exactly. if you can help it.
If you can do it, yeah.
Right.
Well, Tim, there's a number of reasons that you run into the need for a tow. And mechanical maladies are one of them. These engines, over the recent years, are very complex, right? There's a lot of different systems, and by and large, they are reliable, but there are certain trouble spots that can occur, whether it's a newer engine or an older engine.
Yep.
What are some of the things that you find are responsible for the breakdowns?
Yeah, I would say, you know, a lot of times it's just a matter of keeping up on changing, you know, your filters.
You got a starter over here, right? This is possibly an area that's a problem, right?
Sure. You know, starters fail. It's a pretty simple fix, but if you're out on the water, it's going to present an issue.
How about fuel filters? You got some fuel filters over here?
Yeah, on this engine, the fuel filters on the front of the motor.
On the front, yep.
Those need to get changed out periodically.
Okay. What else you got? You got these. This is high power energy right here, right? Electricity.
Yep. You know, things like loose connections with wiring harnesses, and you know, going from the engine forward to the controls. A lot of times they shake free, and you know that's an issue.
Okay.
But you know, staying on top of, you know, the oil, checking your oil and your oil filters, doing that regularly, topping off your fluids.
So that can lead to failure.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
And then certainly in addition to the on-engine fuel filters, most boats have or should have a water separating filter in addition to that.
Like a Raycor or something like
exactly.
that.
Exactly. It's something where you can drain the water before each operation.
Yeah.
And just keep fresh fuel going into your engine. So
something like this, and then we're not pointing out this particular engine, it's just an example.
Right.
But it's got all that electrical connections. A loose battery cable could throw you off, a starter malfunction. You say you get water in the fuel.
Yep.
The filters are bad. Now, how do you avoid that? People say, okay, I understand there's a lot of things can go wrong. Is that part of the spring commissioning process? Is that where you dial in?
Well, I think, you know, start off the year with, you know, going through all the major systems, but then each time you go out and operate the boat, you want to have a checklist of things you're looking for.
Yes.
You know, check your battery connections, make sure they're not loose. Check your water separator filter, drain the bowl, make sure there's no water in there to start before you get underway. Check your fuel, keep track of your fuel consumption so that you know roughly what your boat burns. And
right, we're going to be talking about that. So, so again, spring commissioning, lay the foundation is what I hear you say, and then come back on a periodic basis and check. Do a light check, make sure the fuel filters are clear, make sure the connections are tight and clean. And that's going to keep you out of trouble, maybe even 50% of the time, right?
Yeah, well, hopefully. And that should be a daily checklist. You should have your daily checklist and your monthly checklist of things that you should be on the look for. Checking the oil every single time you go out, because if you don't pull the stick, you don't know if you're having a problem. So,
that's a good point.
Yeah,
good point.
Every single time.
Well, Tim, you know, within this small group of high priority reasons that people need a tow, one of them I would guess would be running aground. And I know from my boating in this area, everything's shifting all the time. You know, if I go up to Annisquam, I look at the buoys one day, and there's a big storm, the bar will move over, or maybe the buoy will move over, or if you go someplace at low tide as opposed to high tide, maybe now you run into rocks or sand. So there's objects that are moving out there, there's objects that are stationary but are exposed differently with the tides and the current and all that sort of thing. So that's got to be a very common reason for people needing a tow, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, greater Boston area, the tides average close to 10 feet. So a lot of people aren't used to that, especially if they're new to this area.
Right.
You know, down in Florida, you might get a couple feet of tide, or even in Cape Cod, Nantucket Sound, 3 feet versus, 10 feet of tide on the other side of Cape Cod and the bay. So you definitely have to
get caught by a surprise, right?
Yep.
So how do you avoid that? I mean, it looks like you've got a chart there. Is that still a useful thing to trying to keep yourself from running aground?
Yep, 100%. You need to have charts, local charts of the area that you're operating in. You have to be aware of the tides specific to the area you're boating because it changes. High tide in Boston is not the same high tide as Newburyport, so you got to be aware of that, and local knowledge too. Even with all those tools, if you're going into an area like Ipswich or Essex where you get a lot of shoaling, that's when you want to reach out to local resources like the harbor masters who are familiar with the area, TowBoatUS, or a commercial assistance provider who's in and out of that area on a regular basis. You definitely want to use all the tools that are available to you, because because it can really stink when you're stuck up there for a whole 6 hours.
So don't rely just on the GPS.
Yeah.
Use all these tools at your disposal.
Yeah, because sometimes the GPSs are not accurate in those tidal areas. If they're not updated and they shift after a storm, you really have to go beyond just a chart plotter and the paper chart. You have to Google Earth, local knowledge. You got to combine all those things to put it all together.
Good point.
Yep.
Good point. Well, Tim, few different reasons for bad places to be in terms of needing a tow. One of them is a dead battery, and I know from experience that a battery could. One of the things you want to do is, of course, check the batteries, and we'll talk more about that. But even sometimes when you check them, you don't put them under load. They look like they're good, and they're not good. So batteries can be kind of a dark and murky place in terms of actually knowing what the condition are.
Yep.
So I could go to sea with a battery that won't take a load, or I could sit out at a mooring all day long and run everything electrical and run down a perfectly good battery, right? And then I need to call a towing company. So do you see that sort of situation? What do you see in that area?
Yeah, it's very common. You can have a good battery in the boat, but the connections are dirty and the engine's not going to start. So that's number one.
Yeah.
Or you can have a battery that looks good on the surface, but it's a few years old. It's getting at the end of its life, and you can find yourself stuck.
Right.
Or what's I would say probably most common is that people are out on anchor or hanging off the mooring for the afternoon. They got all the electronics going, the radios, everything.
Right.
They run the battery down, and they need a jump start.
Then they get nothing.
And in those situations, we're obviously there to help. We have cables and booster packs in all our boats, and it's no big deal to get people going again. But if you can avoid it, you got to be aware of how old the batteries are and make sure you load test them every now and then. And just be aware of how much you're running down your system.
How much you're running down, kind of make a mental note. I'm running all these electrical things and putting the drain on the battery.
Yeah, start the engine up periodically. Make sure you still got some juice. And
that'll help you avoid being on the end of a tow line.
That's right. Or on the end of the jumper cables.
Into the jumper cables. Well, Tim, running out of fuel is another common reason for needing a tow home, and there's a lot of different reasons for that. One that strikes me is you go boating early in the season, I don't know, April, October, and the fuel docks oftentimes close earlier than you anticipate. So I'm going over to pick up fuel. I think they're open till 5. They're only open to 3.
Yep.
Now I make the decision, I really want to go boating. I head out, kind of playing the margin a little bit. So that could be one reason that I run out of fuel. What are some of the other reasons you've found in your experience?
Yeah, I think people underestimate what their fuel consumption is. If it's a new to them type of boat, you don't quite know what the burn rate is. And also, boat fuel gauges are very unreliable. Very unreliable. So that's very common. You think you have a quarter of a tank, you're on empty. I find another reason is I'll go out with a certain destination in mind. I'll hit this island, that island. I'm having a good time, and I'll stretch my route, right? So not only how much load do I have on board in terms of fuel and passengers, but also have I lengthened my route, which is very common. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Plans change. You go to this island and anchor in and swim, and you've now run out of fuel.
You had a good time.
Yep.
So, okay. How about, again, we're trying to help people understand how to avoid being towed.
Yep.
It seems like maybe to keep a backup little manual log or notebook or something would be helpful.
Yeah, I think keeping track of your hours after fueling up can at least give you a spot check on, roughly how much fuel you've used and where you're at, just so you have a way to double check your fuel gauge.
And then if they do run out, you come out with gas cans like this.
Yep, we carry fuel on all our towboats, so it's pretty routine to get somebody going again and avoid a tow.
Right.
So.
Right. Tim, another major reason for people needing a tow is engine overheating, and I know from my experience over the last couple of years, the marine growth, for some reason or other, is going wild, particularly with barnacles. I know that's when I kick up my IO, the outdrive and the propeller is just crusted with barnacles and mussels. And in a marine engine, it's sucking this raw water, usually in some way or another, up. So it needs free access to that to avoid overheating.
Yep.
Are you finding those sort of problems lead to tows?
Yeah, I mean, overheats are common. You got to keep the water intakes clean and clear of bottom growth. Impellers and things like that are maintenance items that they don't last forever. They have to be replaced periodically. Heat exchangers, oil coolers, all those things need to be maintained and cleaned out every so often. So
even your sea strainers, right? If you're
Yep.
running inboards or
Yep.
diesels, you got the sea strainers
Yep.
that are taking it.
Yep, seaweed, jellyfish, trash, anything that's floating, your boat could suck it right up into the sea strainer.
And you don't need, exotic tools
Nope.
to keep. I got a wrench here, but oftentimes I'll use a screwdriver to check the vents of my outdrive.
Yep.
About this time of year, around August, September.
Yep.
Because that's about the time I start to get the growth. So, and as you said, there's so many other pieces on my engine. Comes up through the outdrive through an oil cooler, which typically gets encrusted with barnacles.
Yep.
And then it goes up through a series of 2 water pumps. And as you said, the water pump impellers are rubber, right?
Yep.
So they can go away. And then you've
Right.
got all these other pieces, like you said, the thermostats and the risers and all that
Yeah.
stuff. Right.
So I think you start at the point of entry, at the
Right.
through-hull fitting, to the sea strainer, to the water pump, to the heat exchangers and coolers, and that's how you diagnose your issue and avoid hopefully a problem
Right.
going forward.
So spring commissioning, again, a good foundation
Yeah.
in terms of getting off to a good start in that area?
Yeah, I mean, every few years you definitely got to clean the heat exchangers and things like that. The impellers, sometimes it's once a season, cheap repair to stay ahead of.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
all good things to be aware of.
Okay, good. Well, Tim, obviously no one wants to get on the end of a tow line, but it probably happens to most people sooner or later. But a lot of people, I think, don't really understand what to do if they get into a situation where they obviously need a tow. So let's say the motor breaks down and they're a couple miles offshore. I guess the first thing would be to start with the safety basics.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I would say the first thing to do is put on your life jackets because now you're disabled. Okay,
Right.
So you want to put a life jacket on and make sure the rest of your crew does as well. Then I would say next step is to drop anchor if necessary.
Okay.
And then to take note of what your position is so that you can then pass that along to if it's a commercial assistance company you're trying to reach, or if you're talking with the Coast Guard,
Okay.
that's what they're going to ask you.
Can I loop back around just a second? The life jackets, great point. People thinking ahead should make sure that they know where the life jackets are and they're
Yeah.
easily accessible,
Yeah.
right? Another point to add on to what you just said is the anchor. A lot of people don't
Yeah.
know where it is or whether it's
Yeah.
properly stowed. Is that something,
Yeah.
again, they should look ahead and anticipate? If I need that, I need to put it in a place where I can use it just like you're talking
Yeah,
about here.
I mean, the life jackets shouldn't be locked in some compartment somewhere, nor should your anchor, because you never know when you're going to need it.
Yeah, when you're
gotta
going
have
to get
them,
disabled.
Yep, readily available.
Yeah.
So that's a good point.
All right, and,
Yep.
and you talked about you got everyone settled down, they're safe, you're locked in one spot. Now you've got to contact the tower, and you got to give them your own location, right? They're going to be wondering where are you?
Yep.
So GPS is a great tool, but charts is still a very useful tool for this, right?
Yeah, if you can either provide your latitude and longitude position, you can pull that off for your GPS if you're familiar in how to use them. You need to make sure you're not giving the tower some arbitrary waypoint.
Does that happen often?
It does.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure it's your actual position. If that's not available, you can reference a chart, and if all else fails, you can contact the Coast Guard via VHF radio, and they can oftentimes triangulate your position on channel 16.
Okay.
So that's an option.
So it's important. So what you're again, I build on what you're saying. most people have smartphones. Sometimes the VHF is getting overlooked these days.
Yep.
But that can be a critical tool and has this ability to triangulation
Right.
that the smartphone doesn't have, right?
Yeah. If you have a radio and you put a call out, you're putting a call out to everybody who's listening. If you call one person over the cell phone, you're only communicating to that one individual. So
Right.
it's good to have both.
Good to have both.
Yeah.
And a lot of the companies now have apps. So if you have the smartphone, you have both.
Yep.
You can download the app on the fly, right?
Yep. We have people download BoatUS's application if they have a smartphone and they have, if they're in the data range, if you will.
Right, the cell phone range, yeah.
It takes 30 seconds to do it, and if you click the request to tow button, it'll populate your latitude and longitude position. So
wow, that's nice.
if you're lost in the fog and you're disoriented, not a bad option.
Right,
so,
right. So to recap, get secure in place, figure out where you are, and have some different tools to contact help, right?
Yep, and then just be prepared to answer some basic questions. You're gonna, whether it's TowBoatUS or the Coast Guard or a harbor master that you're talking to, they're gonna want to know how many people are on board, what kind of vessel you are, what's the length, what's the make, what's the nature of your problem. All that's going to have to get passed along, and then where you are and where you need to go to.
Okay.
You know, that's going to dictate, you know,
who
where
comes
who comes to your aid.
Help.
Yep. Just because you're off of Cape Ann, we might not send a boat out of Newburyport if you're going towards Marblehead. You might be getting a boat out of Beverly, or So where you're going is key.
Good point.
Yep.
Good point. Tim, if a boater is unfortunate enough to need a tow, what are the basic steps? If you call it the towboat operator showing up, how does the process typically work?
Yeah. So usually boaters will either contact our dispatch center over the phone, or they'll contact us locally over the VHF radio, and at that point we'll take a look at their position and figure out what our estimated time of arrival is. That's passed on to the boater, and then we generally ask the boater to stand by the VHF radio.
Okay.
And if they have a radio on board, so that we can stay in contact with them until the towboat arrives on scene.
Okay.
Once the vessel is on scene, they're going to generally take a ride around the boat, just get a feel for what the cleats are up, or bow bits up on the bow that we could be towing from, and have a quick conversation with the customer on board, and kind of give them a rundown on how the transition into a tow is going to take place.
Yeah, how does that work? Does the customer just throw you a line and you tie it off, or what's going on there?
We're going to use all of our own lines. We have
like these here, huh?
Yep, bridles, or we have hooks that are designed to connect into a trailering eye, depending on the size of the vessel.
Yep.
But we want to use all our own lines because the tow line is designed for towing.
A lot of stress.
It's got a very high braking strength, and we're going to choose the right line for the conditions that we're operating in.
Okay, so a bridle or this hook, kind of attach it to his boat.
Yep, and the bridle is most commonly used. We're going to hand the customer, or we're either going to toss them this line.
Kind of get them the rope.
Yep, and if we're not able to get close enough, if the conditions are rocking and rolling, we'll use a heaving line. We've got these, lines that we can attach to the larger tow line and get it over to you. But the captain's going to direct exactly how he wants the line attached to the bow of the vessel, so that we're not doing any unnecessary damage.
Right.
So that's pretty.
Then you're going to tow them there, and to pretty much straighten a line. You only go hip towing when you get closer into land and need the maneuverability. I guess,
if you're out in open water broken down, the towboat is going to put you out behind the towboat, because that's going to be the safest and the fastest way that we can get you back into port.
Yes.
Once we get into a no-wake area, we're getting closer to your final destination where it might be some close quarter maneuvering. Then we're going to tie the boats up side by side, or on our hip.
On our hip,
And that's when these come into play.
Okay.
These big fenders here.
Wow. Yeah.
Uh,
Put them up so people can
Yep.
see them. Yeah.
So the tow company is going to be using all their own tie-up lines, all their own fenders, and these are going to go in between the towboat and your vessel to fender them properly so that the boats aren't bumping together.
Right.
So
right.
that's
So you guys are going to use your equipment
Yep.
to ensure the safety of everyone.
We're going to use all our own lines, all our own fenders between the boats, and the only thing that the boater is going to have to provide is their docking fenders and their docking lines, and have those ready to go when we get to the final destination.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Tim, it's hard to believe, but time to wrap up the show today, and we've covered a lot of, I think, useful points, valuable points for people in terms of towing. First, how to avoid a tow, and then second, what to do if the tower shows up, and then finally, how the process works once they do.
Yep.
What would you like to add before we wrap up the show today?
I would say, like we talked about, make sure at the start of the season your boats, you're starting out on the right foot, going through some of that preseason maintenance, and then just be aware that things do happen out there, unforeseen, and that's when you want to make sure you know how to make the call if you need help,
right.
and try to be prepared with insurance so it's not going to cost you, and you can sit back and relax if we do come out to see you and give
right.
you a hand. So I think that's about it.
All right. Tim, if they have questions, is there like a website that they can visit to get some commonly asked questions answered?
Yep, BoatUS.com or the 800 dispatch phone number, which is 800-391-4869. And they can always direct somebody to a local resource with local knowledge. If you're just looking for some information on a port that you might be unfamiliar with, you can always call over the phone or on the radio, and
right.
More than happy to assist.
Okay, perfect.
All right, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Smart Boating viewers, for joining us. If you've got comments or questions, visit us at our website, www.smartboatingus.com. Thank you.